The old hound's sudden bolt toward the towering orc woman standing at the property line was so unexpected that Nathan Pierce barely had time to drop his axe before Jasper disappeared into the morning fog, his arthritis apparently forgotten in his desperate sprint. Nathan cursed under his breath and followed, his boots squelching through the mud of his half-plowed field. Jasper was 14 years old, gray-muzzled and stiff-jointed, and hadn't run like that since he was a pup. The dog had been lying in his usual spot by the woodpile just moments ago, seemingly asleep, when he suddenly lurched to his feet and took off as though the devil himself were chasing him. Except Jasper was running towards something, not away, and that something made Nathan's blood run cold. The orc woman stood perfectly still at the edge of his land, her green hands raised in a gesture of peace. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and muscular arms visible beneath the worn leather vest she wore over a simple linen shirt. Her skin was a deep forest green, darker than most orcs Nathan had seen during his time in the border wars, and her black hair was pulled back in a thick braid that fell past her shoulders. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears twitched as Jasper bounded toward her through the mist. Nathan expected her to draw a weapon, to kick at the dog, to do anything other than what she actually did. She dropped to one knee, her face transforming from stoic wariness to pure joy as Jasper reached her and immediately began licking her face, his entire body wiggling with excitement Nathan had not seen in years. "Jasper, come," Nathan called, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. He was not wearing his sword. He had not worn his sword in 3 years, not since he mustered out and bought this failing farm at the edge of civilized territory. "Jasper, here, boy." The dog completely ignored him, instead pressing his head against the orc woman's chest as she wrapped her arms around him, her eyes closing briefly. She was murmuring something Nathan could not hear, her voice low and gentle. Nathan approached slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening even as his mind raced. Orcs did not come this far into human territory alone. They did not approach homesteads unarmed and peaceful, and they certainly did not embrace strange dogs like long-lost friends. Something was very wrong or very strange or both. "That is far enough, human," the orc woman said without looking up from Jasper. Her voice was deep and melodious with only the slightest accent. "I mean you no harm. I only came to see if the rumor was true." "What rumor?" Nathan asked, stopping about 10 feet away. Up close, he could see that her clothes were travel-worn and dusty, and there was a fresh scar across her left forearm. She carried no visible weapons, though that meant little. Orcs were dangerous even unarmed. "That an old soldier lived here with an old hound." She finally looked up at him, and Nathan was struck by her eyes. They were amber, bright and clear, with a depth of emotion in them that surprised him. "A hound that once belonged to someone I knew." Nathan's grip on his knife loosened slightly. "You are saying my dog is not mine." "I am saying your dog was once mine," she replied softly, still stroking Jasper's head. The dog had settled against her, his tail wagging slowly, his eyes half closed in contentment. "Or rather, he belonged to my father. His name is Jasper, yes. And he has a white mark on his right hindquarter shaped like a crescent moon." Nathan felt the world tilt slightly. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I helped whelp him 14 years ago," the orc woman said. "Because I fed him from a bottle when his mother could not nurse him. Because he slept in my bed until he was 6 months old and too large to fit." She paused, her voice thickening. "And because I thought he died with my father 4 years ago." The silence that followed was broken only by Jasper's contented panting and the distant call of crows in the fields. Nathan's mind was working furiously, trying to reconcile this story with what he knew. He had won Jasper in a card game from another veteran shortly after mustering out. The man had said he acquired the dog from a peddler who claimed it was well trained for hunting. Nathan had been lonely enough and drunk enough to trade a month's pay for the animal and had never regretted it. 4 years ago, Nathan said slowly, there was a battle at Rothger's Crossing. I was there. The orc woman's expression hardened. My father was there also. He was trying to negotiate a peace treaty with your commanders. He brought only a small honor guard, and he brought Jasper because the dog was his favorite companion. Her voice dropped. Your people slaughtered them under a flag of truce. Nathan felt sick. He remembered Rothger's Crossing, remembered the chaos and the shouting, remembered his captain claiming the orcs had come to attack and ordering them to defend themselves. He remembered the confusion, the blood, the horrified realization afterwards that they might have just killed emissaries instead of warriors. The official report had buried the incident, claimed the orcs attacked first, but Nathan had never been entirely sure. I was not part of that, he said quietly. I was stationed on the northern ridge. By the time we arrived, it was over. But you heard what happened, she said. It was not a question. You know what your people did. I know what I was told. I know it did not sit right with me then, and it does not sit right with me now. Nathan looked at Jasper, who was still pressed against the orc woman as though he had found his way home after a long journey. I am sorry for your loss. If your father was a man who loved dogs and sought peace, then we are all poorer for his death. The orc woman studied him for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy something within her, because her shoulders relaxed fractionally. My name is Thara, Thara Ironwood. My father was Chief Garak Ironwood of the Eastern Valleys clan. Nathan Pierce, he replied, former sergeant, now a very poor farmer. The land is difficult here, Thara observed, glancing at his fields. Too rocky and the soil is thin. It was cheap, Nathan said with a slight shrug. And far from anywhere I might run into former comrades who want to talk about the glory days. Something that might have been understanding flickered across Thara's face. You did not leave the army happily. I left before the army made me into something I did not want to be. Nathan shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how strange this conversation was. He was standing in his field discussing his regrets with an orc woman who was cradling his supposedly loyal dog like a lost child. How did you find us? How did you even know Jasper survived? I did not know for certain until this moment, Thara admitted. But 6 months ago, a traveling merchant came through the mountains. He dealt with both humans and orcs, one of the few who still does. He mentioned seeing an old soldier with a wolfhound that matched Jasper's description. I thought it might be wishful thinking, but I had to know. She looked down at the dog, her expression softening. After my father died, after my clan cast me out for protesting the war, I had nothing left of him. Nothing except memories. And now this. They cast you out, Nathan heard himself ask, though it was not really his business. I said the war was unjust. I said my father's death demanded justice, not revenge. I said we should honor his memory by continuing his peace efforts. Thara's jaw tightened. My uncle, who took over as chief, said I was a traitor and a coward. He gave me 1 day to leave our territory. When was this? 3 years ago this summer. And you have been alone since then. I am outcast, Thara said simply. No clan will take me. I trade my labor for food and shelter where I can. I move often because humans do not trust an orc and orcs do not trust one who has been cast out. She met his eyes again. I am telling you this so you understand I am no threat to you. I have nothing and no one. I came only to see the dog, to know that some small piece of my father still lives in this world. Now that I have seen him, I will go." She made to stand, but Jasper immediately whined and pressed harder against her legs, clearly not wanting her to leave. Thara's face crumpled for just a moment, revealing a flash of deep pain before she mastered herself. "Jasper, let her up," Nathan said, but the dog ignored him again, looking up at Thara with devoted eyes. "He always was stubborn," Thara murmured, running her hand over his head one more time. "You are a good boy, Jasper. You always were, but I cannot stay." Nathan should have let her go. It would have been the sensible thing, the safe thing. An orc wandering alone near human settlements would eventually draw attention from militia patrols or bounty hunters. If she were found near his property, it could bring trouble to his door. He had worked hard to build a quiet life here, away from war and conflict. But looking at her face, at the way she held his dog, at the resigned sorrow in her eyes, Nathan found himself thinking of all the things he had lost in the war. Friends, innocence, faith in simple answers. He thought of the home he could never return to, because the man his family wanted him to be had died somewhere on a battlefield he could barely remember. "When did you last eat?" he asked abruptly. Thara blinked at him, surprised. Yesterday morning I had some dried meat." "I was about to make breakfast," Nathan lied. He had been planning to work straight through until noon and eat then, but it did not matter. "You could come to the house, have a proper meal before you go." Suspicion and hope warred in Thara's expression. "Why would you offer that?" "Because Jasper clearly loves you, and that dog is an excellent judge of character," Nathan said. "And because you walked a long way to see him, and you deserve better than to leave with an empty stomach and a broken heart." He paused. "And because I have been alone on this farm for 3 years, and I have learned that loneliness is its own kind of war wound." Thara searched his face again, and Nathan kept his expression open and honest. He was not entirely sure why he was doing this, except that it felt right in a way few things had felt right since he left the army. "One meal," Thara said finally, "and then I will go. I do not want to bring trouble to you." "Trouble and I are old acquaintances," Nathan said with a faint smile. "Come on. The house is not much, but it is warm and dry." He turned and began walking back toward the small farmhouse that sat near the eastern edge of his property. After a moment, he heard Thara following, with Jasper padding happily at her heels. The dog had not looked that energetic or content in months, and Nathan felt a pang of guilt. How long had Jasper been quietly mourning, surrounded by a human who did not understand the depth of his loss? The farmhouse was indeed small, just 3 rooms and a loft, but Nathan kept it clean and well maintained. It was one of the few things he could still take pride in. He pushed open the door and gestured for Thara to enter, watching her have to duck slightly to clear the frame. "Sit wherever you like," he said, moving to the hearth where the fire from the previous night still smoldered. He added kindling and fresh wood, blowing on the coals until flames caught. "I have eggs, bread from 2 days ago, some bacon, nothing fancy." "It sounds like a feast," Thara said quietly. She had settled on the floor near the hearth rather than in one of the chairs, and Jasper immediately curled up against her side, his head resting on her thigh. She stroked his ears absently, her eyes distant. Nathan worked in silence for a while, setting a pan on the fire, slicing bacon, cracking eggs into a bowl. The familiar routine was soothing, and he found himself hyper-aware of Thara's presence in the small space. She was very still, watching him with an unreadable expression, and he wondered what she was thinking. "You keep a neat home for a soldier," she observed eventually. "My mother was very particular about such things," Nathan replied. "She used to say that a man who could not keep his own space clean could not be trusted with anything important." He smiled slightly at the memory. I did not appreciate the lesson at the time, but it stuck. Is she still alive? Your mother? No. She passed 5 years ago before I mustered out. My father died when I was young. Nathan poured the eggs into the hot pan, watching them sizzle. It is part of why I joined the army. There was nothing left for me in my home village, and I thought I might make something of myself as a soldier. Did you? Thara asked softly. Nathan was quiet for a moment, turning the eggs carefully. I learned I was good at following orders and surviving. Whether that counts as making something of myself, I am not sure. You are alive. You have land and a home. Those are not small things. No, Nathan agreed. They are not. He glanced at her. What did you do before the war, before everything changed? I helped my father with negotiations, Thara said, both within our clan and with neighboring groups. I learned several languages, studied human and orc history, tried to understand both peoples so I could help build bridges between them. Her expression darkened. Lot of good it did in the end. Your father's dream did not die with him, Nathan said quietly. You are still here, still believing peace is possible. That counts for something. Does it? I am a lone outcast, wandering with no purpose. Thara's hand tightened on Jasper's fur. Some days I think my uncle was right and I am just a fool. If believing in peace makes you a fool, then the world needs more fools, Nathan said firmly. He divided the eggs and bacon onto 2 plates and brought them over, settling on the floor across from Thara and handing her a plate. Eat. You need your strength for the road. Thara took the plate, staring at the food for a moment before looking up at him. Why are you being kind to me? Most humans would have driven me off with weapons or worse. Most humans have not spent years seeing what war actually does, Nathan replied. I have. I am tired of it. If a shared meal and a morning's kindness can be a small act against all that hatred, then it is worth doing. They ate in silence for a while. Nathan noticed that Thara ate quickly but neatly, like someone who had learned not to waste food or time. Jasper watched every bite with hopeful eyes until Thara slipped him a piece of bacon, earning a gentle lick on her hand. You spoil him, Nathan observed. I always did, Thara said, and there was the faintest hint of a smile on her face. It transformed her features, making her look younger and less careworn. My father used to scold me for it. He said I would make Jasper soft and useless as a working dog. He is a terrible hunting dog, Nathan admitted. He is too old and too lazy. Mostly he just keeps me company and sleeps by the fire. That sounds like a good life for him, Thara said softly. I am glad he found you, glad he had these years in peace instead of dying in that massacre. How did he end up with that peddler? Nathan asked. I never questioned the story too deeply, but now I am curious. Someone must have found him after the battle and sold him, Thara said. He was a purebred wolfhound, valuable even old. They probably did not realize he had belonged to an orc. Her expression hardened. Or perhaps they did and thought it a fine joke to profit from my father's death. Nathan set down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone. I am sorry. If I had known you could have done nothing, Thara interrupted. And you have given him a good home. I am grateful for that, truly. She finished the last of her eggs and set the plate aside. Thank you for the meal. It was more than I deserved. You deserved it and more, Nathan said. Where will you go from here? Thara shrugged. North, probably. There are settlements near the Greywood that sometimes need extra hands for the harvest. I can work hard, and if I keep my head down, they usually do not ask too many questions. That is 2 weeks' travel on foot, Nathan said with a frown. And dangerous country. There are bandits in those hills. I can handle myself, Thara said, though there was no bravado in her voice, just weary fact. I have done so for 3 years. I will manage. Nathan looked at her, then at Jasper, who was watching Thara with such devotion it made his chest ache. The dog had been his companion and comfort for 3 years, but clearly Jasper's heart belonged to someone else. Someone who had loved him first and lost him to war and circumstance. The sensible thing would be to let her go. To wish her well, to keep his dog and his quiet life, to avoid the complications that would inevitably come from harboring an outcast orc on his property. But Nathan had learned during the war that sensible and right were not always the same thing. And looking at Thara's resigned expression, at the way she was already preparing to leave behind this small moment of connection and return to her lonely wandering, he found he could not stomach the sensible choice. "I have a proposal," he heard himself say. "And before you answer, just hear me out." Thara looked at him warily. "What kind of proposal?" "This farm is too much for one person to manage properly," Nathan said. "The fields need work, the barn needs repairs. There is a whole section of forest on the western edge that should be cleared for timber. I could use help." Real help, not just occasional day labor. He took a breath. "Stay, work the farm with me. I can offer you shelter, food, and half of whatever profit we make." Thara's eyes widened. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." "You understand what you are suggesting?" "An orc living on your land, working beside you. The moment your neighbors discover it, my nearest neighbor is 6 miles away, and he minds his own business as long as I mind mine," Nathan interrupted. "This is frontier territory. People out here are more concerned with survival than with what species their neighbors are, as long as everyone keeps the peace. You do not know that. You do not know how they would react. You are right. I do not know for certain," Nathan admitted. "But I do know this farm is slowly failing because I cannot keep up with all the work. I do know Jasper has not been this happy since the day I won him. And I do know that you deserve better than wandering alone for the rest of your life, because you had the courage to stand up for peace." He met her eyes steadily. "I am not asking you to stay forever, just through the harvest season. Give it 3 months. If it does not work out, you can leave with coin in your pocket and supplies for the road." Thara was very still, her amber eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Nathan kept his expression open and honest, letting her see that he meant every word. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you risk this for someone you just met?" Nathan thought about that, about all the real reasons tangled up in his head. Because war had taken too much from both of them. Because her father had tried to make peace and been murdered for it. Because Jasper's joy at seeing her again reminded him that love and loyalty mattered more than species or politics. Because he was tired of being alone with only ghosts and regrets for company. Because it is the right thing to do, he said simply. "And I am trying to become the kind of man who does right things, even when they are difficult." Thara's eyes glistened, and she blinked rapidly, looking away. When she spoke again, her voice was rough with emotion. 3 months, through the harvest. "And if there is trouble, I will leave immediately so you do not suffer for your kindness." "Agreed," Nathan said, feeling something that might have been hope unfurl in his chest. "We start today. First task is finishing the field I was working on when Jasper decided to give me a heart attack by running off." That startled a laugh out of Thara, short and surprised, and Nathan realized it was probably the first time she had laughed in a very long time. The sound was warm and genuine, and it made him smile in response. They spent the rest of the morning working the field together. Thara was incredibly strong, easily handling the plow that Nathan usually struggled with, and she had a good eye for the work. They fell into an easy rhythm, and Nathan found himself relaxing in her presence. She did not talk much, but her silence was comfortable rather than awkward. Jasper followed them around the field, moving slowly but contentedly, occasionally sitting down to watch them work. The dog looked more at peace than Nathan had ever seen him, and that alone felt like confirmation that this strange decision was the right one. By the time the sun reached its zenith, they had finished plowing the entire field, something that would have taken Nathan 2 more days on his own. They paused for water and rest in the shade of an old oak at the field's edge. "You are strong," Nathan observed, watching Thara drink deeply from the water skin. "Stronger than I expected." "All orcs are strong," Thara said with a slight shrug. "It is our nature. My father used to say we were born to bear heavy burdens, both physical and spiritual. He sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Thara said softly. "He believed both our peoples could share this land if we would only listen to each other instead of fighting. He spent his whole life working toward that dream." She looked out across the field. "I thought his death meant the dream died too, but maybe it is possible to keep some part of it alive, even in a small way." "A farm is a small thing," Nathan agreed, "but it is a start." They worked through the afternoon, moving on to repairs for the barn's leaky roof. Thara proved to be skilled with her hands, quickly understanding the work and executing it efficiently. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Nathan called a halt. "We have done enough for one day," he said. "I need to show you where you will sleep." He led her to the barn, where he had prepared a space in the loft years ago for storage but never used. It was clean and dry, with a window that let in good light and fresh air. He had already brought up blankets and a straw mattress while Thara was examining the roof beams. "This should be comfortable enough," he said. "If you need anything else, let me know." Thara looked around the space, her expression unreadable. "This is more than adequate, thank you. I will make dinner in an hour or so. Come to the house when you are ready." Nathan left her there and returned to the house, Jasper at his heels. He busied himself with preparing a simple stew, trying not to think too hard about what he had just done. He had invited an orc to live on his property. An outcast orc. If word got out, if the wrong people learned about it, there could be serious consequences. But as he stirred the pot and felt Jasper lean against his leg with a contented sigh, Nathan realized he did not regret the decision. Thara had looked at him with such cautious hope when he made his offer, and he could not bring himself to wish he had stayed silent. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Thara stood outside, looking uncertain. "Come in," Nathan said, stepping aside. "Stew will be ready soon." They ate together again, this time with slightly less awkwardness. Thara asked about the farm, about what crops he grew and what livestock he kept, and Nathan explained his modest operation. He had a small flock of chickens, a milk cow, a vegetable garden, and the fields where he grew wheat and barley to sell. "It is not much," he admitted, "but it is honest work and it is mine." "It is a good life," Thara said, "simple and peaceful. After years of war and wandering, I can appreciate that." They talked a while longer, carefully avoiding topics that were too personal or painful. As the light faded outside, Thara stood to leave. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "I will earn my keep, I promise you that." "I know you will," Nathan replied. "Sleep well, Thara." She ducked out the door, and Nathan watched her cross the yard to the barn, Jasper following her. The dog apparently had decided where he wanted to sleep tonight, and Nathan could not bring himself to call him back. He cleaned up the dishes and banked the fire, then climbed to his own bed in the loft. As he lay there in the dark, he thought about the strange turn his day had taken. This morning he had been alone, struggling with his failing farm and his memories. Tonight there was an orc woman sleeping in his barn. His dog had rediscovered happiness, and Nathan felt the first stirrings of something that might have been purpose. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, and he was not sure what the future would hold. But for the first time in 3 years, Nathan found himself looking forward to tomorrow instead of simply enduring it. The days that followed settled into a pattern. They rose with the sun and worked until dusk, only breaking for meals and brief rests. Thara proved to be an invaluable partner. She was strong, skilled, and tireless, tackling every task with focused determination. Together they accomplished in days what would have taken Nathan weeks alone. But more than just the work, Nathan found himself appreciating Thara's company. She was thoughtful and observant, often noticing things he missed. When the plow broke, she was the one who spotted the hairline fracture in the blade before it could snap completely. When the cow showed signs of illness, she knew exactly what herbs to gather from the forest to help settle its stomach. "How do you know all this?" Nathan asked one afternoon as they worked in the garden, pulling weeds and checking the vegetable plants. "My mother was a healer," Thara said. "She taught me about plants and animals, how to read signs of illness or distress. It was supposed to be knowledge I would pass to my own children someday." She paused, her hands stilling in the dirt. "But that future is lost to me now, because you are outcast. Because no orc male will take an outcast as a mate, and no human would ever consider it." She said it matter-of-factly, as though stating an obvious truth, but Nathan heard the hurt beneath the words. "That seems like a waste," he said quietly. "You would make a fine mother. Patient, knowledgeable, strong." Thara looked at him with surprise, and Nathan felt heat rise to his face, suddenly aware of how his words might sound. "I just mean you should not give up on that future," he said quickly. "The world is changing. Maybe not as fast as your father hoped, but it is changing. Who knows what will be possible in a few years?" "Perhaps," Thara said softly, but she did not sound convinced. She returned to her weeding, and Nathan let the subject drop. As the weeks passed, Nathan noticed small changes. Thara smiled more often, her guarded expression easing into something more relaxed. She began to hum while she worked, old orc songs in a language Nathan did not understand but found beautiful anyway. She and Jasper were inseparable, the old dog following her everywhere and sleeping curled against her side every night. And Nathan found himself watching her more than he should, watching the way she moved, graceful despite her size and strength. Watching the way sunlight brought out hints of gold in her dark hair. Watching the way her eyes lit up when she laughed at something Jasper did. It was dangerous territory, and Nathan knew it. She was his employee, his guest, someone who had trusted him to provide safe shelter. More than that, she was an orc, and he was human, and there were centuries of hatred and prejudice between their peoples. Nothing good could come from the warmth that was beginning to bloom in his chest when he looked at her. But knowing something and feeling something were very different things, and Nathan could not quite convince his heart to be sensible. The first real test came 6 weeks into their arrangement. Nathan had gone into the nearby settlement to trade some eggs and vegetables for supplies, leaving Thara to work on clearing the western forest section. He had made the trip a dozen times before without incident, but this time he noticed people watching him more closely than usual. At the general store, the owner, an older man named Marcus, leaned across the counter as Nathan paid for flour and salt. "Heard you got help on your place," Marcus said casually. "That true?" Nathan kept his expression neutral. "Where did you hear that?" "Young Timothy was out hunting last week, said he saw someone working your fields. Said it looked like a big fellow, real tall." Nathan's mind raced. Timothy was the son of his nearest neighbor, an enthusiastic but not particularly bright young man who spent more time hunting than working his father's land. "Hired a drifter for the harvest season," Nathan said with a shrug. "Strong back, does not ask too many questions, works cheap." You know how it is. Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. Makes sense. Your place is too much for one man. Just surprised you did not mention it last time you were in. Did not think it worth mentioning, Nathan replied evenly. He keeps to himself, does his work, and that is all I care about. Sure, Marcus said, but there was something in his eyes that made Nathan nervous. Just make sure this drifter of yours does not cause any trouble. We have had problems with raiders in the area and people are on edge. No trouble, Nathan promised. You have my word. He finished his business quickly and headed back to the farm, his thoughts churning. If Timothy had seen Thara from a distance, he might not have realized she was an orc. The story about a drifter worker would hold for now. But if anyone got a closer look, if anyone came to the farm unexpectedly, the truth would come out. When he arrived home, he found Thara had made remarkable progress on clearing the forest section. She had several trees felled and was working on stripping branches, her movements efficient and practiced. We need to talk, Nathan said without preamble. Thara straightened, immediately alert. What happened? He explained the conversation with Marcus, watching her face grow tight and closed as he spoke. I will leave tonight, she said when he finished, before there is more trouble. No, Nathan said firmly. That is not what I am saying. I am just warning you that we need to be careful. If you hear anyone approaching the farm, get out of sight. If I have visitors, stay in the barn or the forest until they leave. Nathan, you are risking too much. Let me decide what risks I am willing to take, he interrupted. You have done nothing wrong. You have worked hard, kept your word, and been nothing but respectful. I am not going to throw you out because some people might have ignorant opinions. It is more than ignorant opinions, Thara said, her voice rising. If they discover you are harboring an orc, they could drive you from your land. They could burn your home. They could kill you. They could try, Nathan said. But I am not as easy to kill as I look, and this is my land. I get to decide who is welcome on it. You are a fool, Thara said, but there was no heat in her words. Instead, she sounded almost tender. A stubborn, idealistic fool. I have been called worse, Nathan replied with a slight smile. Come on, let me help you with these trees. We can get more done together. They worked side by side until dusk, and Nathan noticed that Thara stayed closer to him than usual, as though reassuring herself of his presence. When they finally stopped for the night, she turned to him as they walked back to the farmhouse. Why? She asked quietly. Why are you really doing this? It cannot just be about the farm work. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. During the war, I did things I am not proud of. I followed orders that I knew were wrong because I was too much of a coward to question them. I watched good people die for bad reasons, and I told myself it was not my place to interfere. He met her eyes. When I left the army, I promised myself I would never again stand by while something wrong happened, not if I had the power to make it right. You being forced to wander alone, being punished for the crime of wanting peace, that is wrong. If I can give you safe harbor, then I will. It is as simple as that. Thara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You are a better man than you give yourself credit for. I am just trying to be, Nathan said softly. Trying is all any of us can do. They stood there in the fading light, and Nathan felt something shift between them. The air seemed heavier, charged with possibility and unspoken words. Thara took a half-step closer, her hand rising as though to touch his face, and Nathan's breath caught. Then Jasper barked, breaking the moment, and Thara stepped back quickly, her expression closing off. I should go, she said. Good night, Nathan. Good night, he managed, and watched her retreat to the barn with Jasper at her heels. Nathan stood alone in the yard for a long time, his heart pounding, wondering what might have happened if Jasper had not interrupted. wondering if he was grateful for the interruption or disappointed by it. The next few days were slightly awkward, both of them carefully maintaining polite distance. But the work had to continue, and gradually they settled back into their comfortable rhythm. Nathan told himself it was better this way, safer for both of them to keep things strictly professional. But late at night, lying in his bed, he could not stop thinking about the way Thara had looked at him in that moment. Could not stop wondering if the longing he had seen in her eyes was a reflection of his own. 2 weeks later, the situation came to a head in a way Nathan had not anticipated. He was in the barn, organizing the tools, when he heard horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast. Nathan's military training kicked in immediately. He grabbed his sword from where it hung on the wall. He had started wearing it again after the conversation with Marcus, and moved to the barn door. 4 riders were coming up the road to his farm. Nathan recognized Timothy in the lead, along with 2 other young men from the settlement and an older man Nathan did not know. They all carried weapons. "Thara," Nathan called quietly, hoping she could hear him from wherever she was working. "Riders, hide, now." He stepped out of the barn, positioning himself in the yard with the house at his back. The riders pulled up about 20 feet away, and Timothy dismounted with more confidence than Nathan had ever seen from the usually awkward young man. "Afternoon, Nathan," Timothy said. "This here is Sheriff Donovan from the county seat. He has some questions for you." The older man dismounted as well. He was perhaps 50, gray-haired and weathered, with cold blue eyes that assessed Nathan with professional interest. "Mr. Pierce," the sheriff said, "I have received reports that you are harboring an orc on your property. I am here to investigate those claims." "Who made these reports?" Nathan asked calmly, though his grip tightened on his sword. "That is not your concern. What is my concern is whether there is an orc living on this land." Orcs are forbidden within 10 miles of human settlements per the Treaty of 1818. If you are knowingly harboring one, you are in violation of territorial law. Nathan's mind raced. He could deny it, but if they searched the property and found Thara, it would be worse. He could fight, but 4 against 1 were not good odds, and he would likely just get himself killed. Or he could tell the truth and deal with the consequences. "I have an employee," Nathan said carefully. "A worker I hired to help with the harvest. That is not illegal. Is this employee an orc?" The sheriff pressed. Before Nathan could answer, there was movement from behind the house. Thara stepped into view and Nathan's heart sank. She had not hidden. Of course she had not hidden. She was too honorable to let him take the risk alone. "I am the worker," Thara said, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Thara Ironwood. I am an orc, and I have been living on this land for 2 months with Mr. Pierce's permission." The sheriff's hand moved to his weapon. "Then you are in violation of the law, and so is he." "The law is unjust," Thara said. "I have done nothing wrong. I have threatened no one, harmed no one, broken no laws except the accident of my birth." "Your kind are monsters," Timothy burst out. "Everyone knows orcs cannot be trusted. You are probably planning to murder Mr. Pierce in his sleep and steal his land." "If I wanted to kill him, he would already be dead," Thara said flatly. "I am stronger and faster than any human, but I have no interest in violence. I want only to work and live in peace." "Peace," the sheriff scoffed. "Your people do not know the meaning of the word." "My father died trying to make peace with yours," Thara shot back, her voice ringing with controlled fury. "He was murdered under a flag of truce by soldiers too ignorant and frightened to see that he offered friendship, not war. Do not speak to me about what my people know or do not know." The sheriff's expression hardened. "I do not care about your father or your grievances. The law is clear. You must leave this territory immediately, and Mr. Pierce must pay a fine for harboring you." "How much?" Nathan asked. 200 silver, the sheriff said. "And that is being generous. I could confiscate your land entirely for this violation." 200 silver was nearly everything Nathan had saved, the profit from 2 years of struggling to make the farm work. It would leave him with almost nothing to make it through the winter. But looking at Thara, at the proud tilt of her head and the defiance in her eyes even as she faced down armed men who wanted her gone, Nathan knew he would pay it and more. "Fine," he said. "I will have it for you by week's end." "No," Thara said sharply. "Nathan, you cannot—" "Yes, I can," he interrupted. "And I will. This is my choice, Thara." "Then she leaves immediately," the sheriff said. "Right now. And if I hear reports of her within 10 miles of any settlement, I will come back with a warrant for her arrest." "You have no right," Thara began. "I have every right granted by law," the sheriff cut her off. "You are an orc in human territory without permission. Be grateful I am not arresting you on the spot." He looked at Nathan. "You have until Sunday to pay the fine. And Mr. Pierce, choose your friends more carefully in the future. This kind of sympathy for the enemy will not serve you well." The sheriff and his men mounted up and rode off, leaving Nathan and Thara standing in the yard. Jasper emerged from wherever he had been hiding and pressed against Thara's leg, whining softly. "I am sorry," Thara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have stayed hidden. I should never have come here in the first place. Now you have lost everything because of me." "I have not lost everything," Nathan said. "I still have my land, my home, and my self-respect. 200 silver is a lot, but I can earn it back. In years, maybe, and winter is coming. How will you afford supplies, seed for next spring?" Thara shook her head. "I have ruined you." "You have done no such thing," Nathan said firmly. He crossed the distance between them and took her hands in his. They were rough and calloused from work, strong and warm. "Listen to me. What happened here today was not your fault. It was the fault of unjust laws and people who have let fear turn into hatred. You are not responsible for that. But you are paying the price. I am paying the price of my choice," Nathan interrupted. "I chose to offer you shelter. I chose to keep you here even when I knew there might be consequences. I would make the same choice again, Thara. I would make it 100 times over." Thara looked at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Why? Why would you sacrifice so much for someone like me?" "Because you are not someone like you," Nathan said. "You are Thara. You are brave and kind and strong and everything good that this world tries to destroy. You deserve better than to be driven away because of what you are instead of who you are." "Nathan." Thara's voice broke and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I cannot let you do this. I cannot let you lose everything for me." "You are not letting me do anything," he said gently. "I am choosing this, just like I chose to ask you to stay, just like I have chosen every moment we have spent together." He paused, his heart pounding. "Just like I am choosing to tell you that somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as just a worker or a guest. I started seeing you as someone I care about deeply, someone I do not want to lose." Thara stared at him, her amber eyes searching his face. "You care about me. More than I probably should," Nathan admitted. "More than is wise or safe or sensible. But yes, I care about you. I think I have since the day you knelt in the mud and held my dog like he was precious. Since you shared your story and your pain and trusted me to understand. I care about you, Thara, and I do not want you to leave. The sheriff said I must. The sheriff said you must leave the territory within 10 miles of settlements," Nathan said. "My farm is exactly 8 miles from the nearest settlement. If you went to the far western edge of my property, you would be well beyond that boundary." The law does not say you have to leave the entire region, just that you cannot be too close to human towns. You want me to hide on your land, to live in the wilderness like an animal. I want you to stay where I can protect you, Nathan said. We can build a shelter in the forest, somewhere safe and hidden. I can bring you supplies and we can still see each other. It is not perfect, but it is better than you wandering alone again. Thara pulled her hands from his and turned away, her shoulders shaking. You are asking me to live in exile on the edge of your property, sneaking around like a criminal, while you sacrifice everything you have worked for. Do you understand how wrong that is? How much I hate that the world has forced us into this position. I understand, Nathan said quietly. I hate it too, but I would rather have you close and hidden than gone forever. I would rather fight for something imperfect than give up because the situation is not ideal. Thara was silent for a long moment. When she finally turned back to him, her face was wet with tears, but her expression was determined. If I stay, if we try to make this work, you need to understand something, she said. I am not just someone you care about, Nathan. You are not just a kind human who offered me shelter. She took a shaking breath. I love you. I have been falling in love with you since the day you invited me into your home and treated me like a person instead of a monster. Every moment we have spent together, every conversation, every shared meal and laugh in comfortable silence, I have been falling deeper. Nathan's breath caught. Thara, I love you, she continued, her voice stronger now, and I know it is impossible. I know there is no future for us, no way this ends well. But if I am going to hide in your forest and live on the edges of your life, I need you to know the truth. I need you to know that when I look at you, I see the man I want to spend my life with. The man I would choose above all others if the world would let me. Nathan closed the distance between them in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. The world does not get to decide this, he said fiercely. We do. You and me, and I love you too, Thara. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you hum when you work and the way you are gentle with Jasper even when you are exhausted. I love who I am when I am with you, and I do not want to go back to being who I was before. Nathan, she whispered, and then she was kissing him, her lips soft and warm against his. Nathan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, and for a moment the world fell away. There was no law, no prejudice, no impossible situation. There was only Thara in his arms, her heart beating against his and the overwhelming rightness of holding her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thara rested her forehead against his. What do we do? She asked softly. We build you a shelter in the forest, Nathan said. We make it comfortable and safe, and we figure out the rest as we go. And the fine, 200 silver, I will manage, Nathan promised. I have some savings and I can sell some things. I will figure it out. We will figure it out, Thara corrected. Together. Together, Nathan agreed and kissed her again, softer this time, sweet and full of promise. They spent the rest of the day scouting the western forest, looking for a good location to build a shelter. They eventually found a spot near a small stream, sheltered by thick trees and far enough from any paths that it was unlikely to be stumbled upon. Over the next 3 days, they worked frantically to build a small cabin. It was rough and simple, but sturdy and weatherproof. Nathan brought supplies from the house: blankets, cooking equipment, food stores, and Thara gathered wild edibles and set snares for small game. By the time Sunday arrived and Nathan had to ride into town to pay his fine, Thara was settled into her new home. It was not ideal, but it was safe, and it allowed them to stay close. Nathan paid Sheriff Donovan the 200 silver, handing over nearly every coin he had saved. The sheriff counted it carefully, then gave Nathan a long, measuring look. I hope she was worth it, he said. She is worth more than you could possibly understand, Nathan replied evenly. The sheriff shook his head. You are a fool, Pierce. Orcs are animals, no matter how civilized they pretend to be. One day you will realize that, and you will regret this softness. The only thing I regret is that men like you cannot see past your own prejudice, Nathan said. Good day, Sheriff. He left before the sheriff could respond, his blood boiling with suppressed anger. But as he rode back to the farm, his anger gradually faded into determination. Let them think he was a fool. Let them believe orcs were monsters. He knew the truth, and that was enough. When he arrived home, he went straight to Thara's cabin in the forest. She was there, working on weaving a mat from reeds, and she looked up with anxious eyes as he approached. It is done, Nathan said. The fine is paid and we are clear with the law. Thara set aside her weaving and came to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Thank you, she whispered against his chest, for everything. You do not need to thank me, Nathan said, holding her close. We are in this together, remember? They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength and comfort from each other. Then Thara pulled back slightly, looking up at him with a small smile. I made dinner, she said. Such as it is, rabbit stew with wild vegetables. That sounds perfect, Nathan said, and meant it. They ate together in the small cabin, and despite the difficult circumstances, Nathan found himself more content than he had been in years. Thara was here, safe and close, and they were together. Everything else they would figure out. As the weeks passed, they settled into a new routine. Nathan worked the farm during the day, and in the evenings he would go to Thara's cabin. They would share meals, talk, and simply be together. Sometimes Nathan would stay late into the night, reluctant to leave her, though he always eventually returned to the farmhouse to keep up appearances. The harvest came, and though Nathan had to hire occasional day laborers to help with work that Thara used to do, he managed. The profits were less than he had hoped. The fine had taken a significant bite out of his reserves, but he scraped by. Through it all, his relationship with Thara deepened. They talked about everything, their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Thara told him stories of her childhood, of growing up in an orc clan and learning to navigate both orc and human cultures. Nathan shared his own history, his time in the war, his struggles with what he had seen and done, and they fell more in love with each passing day. One evening in late autumn, as they sat together by the fire in her cabin, Thara turned to Nathan with a serious expression. I have been thinking, she said, about the future. What about it? Nathan asked, taking her hand. This cannot last forever, Thara said quietly. Me hiding in the forest, you sneaking out here every night. Eventually someone will notice. Eventually there will be trouble. Then we will deal with it when it comes, Nathan said. Or we could leave, Thara said. Both of us, go somewhere far from here, somewhere we could be together openly. Nathan was quiet for a moment. The thought had occurred to him before, but he had always pushed it aside. You want me to abandon my farm, my home? I want us to have a real future, Thara said, not stolen moments in a hidden cabin. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to build a life with you that does not require hiding who we are. Where would we go? Nathan asked. There is nowhere that a human and an orc would be fully accepted. The far north, Thara said. Beyond the territories where the law has no reach. There are settlements there, mixed communities of humans and orcs and other peoples. They are rough and wild, but they are free. We could make a life there. Nathan thought about it, really considered it. His farm was not much, and he had no family ties keeping him here. The idea of starting fresh somewhere he and Thara could be together openly was tempting, but it was also terrifying. Leaving everything he knew, venturing into unknown territory, risking everything on the possibility of a better life. "I need time to think about this," he said finally. "It is a big decision." "I know," Thara said. "I am not asking for an answer tonight. I just wanted you to know it is an option. That I would go anywhere with you if you would have me." "I would have you anywhere and everywhere," Nathan said, pulling her close. "That is not in question. I just need to be sure I am making the right choice for both of us." "Take all the time you need," Thara said. "I am not going anywhere." Nathan kissed her, soft and lingering, and tried to imagine a future where they did not have to hide. It was a beautiful dream, but he was not sure if it was realistic. The answer came sooner than he expected, and in a way he did not anticipate. 3 weeks later, Nathan was in the settlement picking up winter supplies when he overheard a conversation between two merchants. "Did you hear about the new governor?" one was saying. "Appointed last week. They say he is pushing for reconciliation with the orc territories." "About time," the other replied. "This war has gone on long enough. We need trade and peace, not endless skirmishes." Nathan's ears perked up. A new governor who favored peace. That could change everything. He casually approached the merchants. "Excuse me, I could not help but overhear." "What is this about a new governor?" The first merchant, a jovial man with a red face, grinned. "Governor William Hartley, just appointed by the Territorial Council. Former diplomat, served in the eastern provinces. He has been vocal about ending hostilities with the orcs and establishing proper trade agreements." "Is he serious about it, or is it just talk?" Nathan asked. "Seems serious," the second merchant said. "He has already sent emissaries to several orc clans, offering to negotiate new treaties. Word is he wants to repeal some of the more restrictive laws, allow orcs to settle in human territory under certain conditions." Nathan's heart began to race. If the laws changed, if orcs were allowed to live in human territory legally, then Thara could come back. They could be together openly, build a real life without hiding. "When will these new laws take effect?" Nathan asked. "No idea," the first merchant said with a shrug. "Government moves slow. Could be months, could be years, but at least there is movement in the right direction." Nathan thanked them and left, his mind churning with possibilities. He finished his errands quickly and rode back to the farm faster than was probably wise, desperate to share the news with Thara. He found her at the cabin, repairing a section of the roof that had started to leak. She climbed down when she saw him, her face lighting up with a smile that made his heart ache. "You are back early," she said, coming to greet him. "Is everything all right?" "Everything might be better than all right," Nathan said, and explained what he had heard in the settlement. Thara listened intently, her expression shifting from hope to cautious optimism. "It sounds promising," she said when he finished. "But you said it yourself, it could take years, and there is no guarantee the laws will actually change or that they will be enforced fairly." "I know," Nathan said. "But it is hope, Thara. Real hope for a future where we do not have to hide. Or we could leave now and not have to wait for laws that may never change," Thara pointed out gently. Nathan took her hands in his. "What if we wait, just until spring? If the new governor makes real progress, if the laws start to change, we could have a life here. On my farm, in a place I have already built. But if nothing changes by spring, we go north together. We start fresh somewhere new." Thara searched his face, then slowly nodded. "Until spring," she agreed. "We wait and see what happens. But Nathan, if the situation gets worse, if there is any danger to you, we leave immediately. I will not let you be harmed because of me." "Deal," Nathan said and sealed it with a kiss. Winter came, cold and harsh. Nathan worked hard to keep the farm running and to ensure Thara had everything she needed in her cabin. He brought her extra blankets, stockpiled firewood near her shelter, and made sure she had ample food supplies. The isolation was hard on both of them. There were days when the snow was too deep for Nathan to make it to the cabin, and they would go nearly a week without seeing each other. But they endured, holding on to the hope that spring would bring change. News filtered in slowly from the settlement. Governor Hartley was indeed making progress with the orc clans. Treaties were being negotiated, trade agreements discussed. There was talk of pilot programs that would allow orcs to work in human territory legally, with proper documentation and oversight. It was not perfect, and there was significant resistance from conservative factions, but it was movement in the right direction. In early spring, just as the snow was beginning to melt, Nathan received word that Governor Hartley would be touring the frontier settlements, meeting with citizens and local leaders to discuss the proposed changes to orc relations laws. "He will be in our settlement in 2 weeks," Nathan told Thara excitedly when he brought her the news. "This is our chance. If I could speak to him directly, explain your situation, maybe he could help." "Nathan, I do not want you to risk drawing attention. No more hiding," Nathan said firmly. "No more living in fear of what people might think or do. If this governor is serious about change, then we need to be brave enough to step forward and show him why that change matters." Thara looked uncertain, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes that Nathan had not seen in months. "What are you proposing?" "I am proposing that when Governor Hartley comes to our settlement, we both go to meet him, together, openly." Nathan took her hands. "We tell him our story. We show him that humans and orcs can live together peacefully, can build something good together. We ask him to help us." "They could arrest me on the spot," Thara warned. "They could," Nathan acknowledged, "but I do not think they will, not if the governor is there. And even if they try, I will fight for you. I will not let them take you." Thara was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the decision. Finally, she nodded. "All right, we will try together." The 2 weeks passed in a blur of nervous preparation. Nathan made discreet inquiries about the governor's visit, learning that there would be a public meeting in the settlement square where citizens could voice their concerns and questions. When the day arrived, Nathan and Thara set out together on horseback. It was the first time Thara had been off the farm property in months, and Nathan could see both fear and determination in her face. They arrived at the settlement to find a sizable crowd already gathered. People turned to stare as they approached, and Nathan heard whispers and shocked exclamations as they recognized Thara as an orc. "Stay close to me," Nathan murmured, and Thara nodded, her jaw set. They made their way through the crowd to the front, where a platform had been erected. Governor Hartley stood there with several advisors and local officials, including Sheriff Donovan, whose face darkened when he saw Nathan and Thara. The governor was a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He was currently listening to a farmer complain about orc raids on livestock, nodding thoughtfully. When the farmer finished, the governor's gaze swept across the crowd and landed on Nathan and Thara. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he did not look alarmed. "Yes," he called out. "You there with the orc woman. Did you have something to say?" Nathan's mouth was dry, but he stepped forward. "Governor Hartley, my name is Nathan Pierce. I am a veteran of the border wars and a farmer. This is Thara Ironwood, daughter of Chief Garak Ironwood." There was a collective gasp from the crowd. Sheriff Donovan moved forward, his hand on his weapon. "That orc was ordered to leave this territory months ago," the sheriff said. "She is in violation of the law, and so is Pierce for harboring her. Is that true?" The governor asked, looking at Nathan. "It is true that she was ordered to leave, and that I helped her hide on my property," Nathan said clearly. "But I do not believe the law is just, and I do not believe Thara deserves to be punished for the crime of being born an orc." "That is not for you to decide," the sheriff said angrily. "Peace, Sheriff," Governor Hartley said, holding up a hand. He studied Nathan and Thara with keen interest. "You said her father was Chief Garak Ironwood, the chief who was killed at Hrothgar's Crossing." "Yes, sir," Thara said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was steady despite the hostile crowd around them. "My father went to Hrothgar's Crossing under a flag of truce to negotiate peace. He and his entire party were slaughtered by your soldiers." The crowd erupted in angry shouts, but Governor Hartley raised his hand again, commanding silence. "I have read the reports from Hrothgar's Crossing," he said. "The official version and the less official accounts from soldiers who were there. It was a tragedy and a travesty, and it is one of the reasons I am working to change our relations with the orc clans." He looked at Thara. "Your father was a good man by all accounts. His death was a loss to both our peoples." Thara's eyes widened with surprise, and Nathan felt his own shock. He had not expected the governor to acknowledge the truth so openly. "Sir, with respect, this orc is a lawbreaker," Sheriff Donovan protested. "We cannot simply ignore that because of her father." "You are right, Sheriff," the governor said. "We cannot ignore the law. However, I do have the authority to grant special dispensations in certain cases, particularly when it serves the broader goal of peace and reconciliation." He turned to Nathan and Thara. "Tell me your story, all of it. How you met, why you are together, what you hope to build. And be honest, I will know if you are lying." So Nathan told him. He told the story of Jasper running to Thara, of learning about her father and her exile. He told of offering her work, of growing to know and respect her, of falling in love despite all the reasons it was impossible. Thara added her own perspective, her voice strong and clear as she spoke of her father's dreams and her own hope for a world where people were judged by their character rather than their species. The crowd listened in silence, some faces hostile, others thoughtful, a few openly sympathetic. When they finished, Governor Hartley was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You are either the bravest fools I have ever met or the wisest people in this territory," he said. "Perhaps both." He turned to address the crowd. "This is exactly why I am pushing for changes to our orc relations laws. Because people like Thara Ironwood, who want only to live peacefully and contribute to society, are being punished for accidents of birth. Because people like Nathan Pierce, who see past prejudice to the person beneath, should not have to choose between love and the law." He looked at Sheriff Donovan. "I am granting Thara Ironwood a provisional settlement permit. She may live and work in this territory legally, provided she commits no crimes and reports to local authorities monthly. Any harassment or violence against her will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." The sheriff's face was red with anger, but he nodded stiffly. "As you say, Governor." Governor Hartley turned back to Nathan and Thara. "This is not a perfect solution, and there will be people who oppose it, but it is a start. Use it wisely, and perhaps you can help show others that humans and orcs can coexist peacefully." "We will, sir," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet," the governor said with a wry smile. "You will have a hard road ahead of you, but I believe you are strong enough to walk it." The meeting continued, but Nathan barely heard the rest of it. He was focused on Thara, on the tears streaming down her face, on the hope and joy radiating from her. When the meeting ended, they left the settlement quickly, eager to escape the stares and whispers. They rode back to the farm in silence, both overwhelmed by what had just happened. It was not until they were safely back on Nathan's property that Thara finally broke down, sliding off her horse and into Nathan's arms, sobbing with relief and joy. We can be together, she gasped between sobs. Really together. No more hiding. No more hiding, Nathan agreed, holding her tightly. We can build the life we want right here. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, letting the reality of their new circumstances sink in. Finally, Thara pulled back, wiping her eyes. What do we do now? Now. Nathan smiled. Now you move out of that cabin in the forest and into the farmhouse where you belong. We work the farm together openly, and we figure out the rest as we go. Together, Thara said, echoing the promise they had made months ago. Together, Nathan confirmed. Over the next few weeks, they settled into their new life. Thara moved into the farmhouse, taking over the loft while Nathan remained in the main room to maintain some propriety, though they both knew it was a thin pretense. The reaction from the community was mixed. Some people were openly hostile, refusing to trade with Nathan or acknowledge Thara's presence. Others were cautiously accepting, willing to give them a chance. And a few, like Marcus from the general store, were unexpectedly supportive. You have courage. I will give you that, Marcus said when Nathan came in for supplies with Thara at his side. And she is clearly a hard worker if your farm is anything to judge by. That is what matters out here on the frontier. Thara handled both the hostility and the acceptance with grace, never responding to provocation and always conducting herself with dignity. Nathan was fiercely proud of her, and his love only grew as he watched her navigate this difficult situation. As spring turned to summer, they worked the farm together as equal partners. The crops flourished under their combined care, and for the first time in years, Nathan's farm was truly prospering. But more than the material success, Nathan treasured the simple joys of their daily life together. Waking up and hearing Thara moving around downstairs, humming as she prepared breakfast. Working side by side in the fields, their movements synchronized from months of partnership. Sharing meals and conversation, laughter and quiet moments. Falling asleep to the sound of her breathing in the loft above him, knowing she was safe and close. It was not perfect. They still faced prejudice and suspicion from some quarters. Sheriff Donovan made a point of stopping by monthly when Thara went to report her presence, clearly hoping to catch them in some violation. And there were occasional insults shouted from passing wagons. Once a rock thrown at Thara in the settlement that Nathan intercepted with his body, earning a nasty bruise. But they endured together, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating the small victories. As summer turned to autumn and they brought in a record harvest, Nathan knew the time had come to take the next step. One evening, after they had finished dinner and were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Nathan turned to Thara. I have been thinking, he said. About what? Thara asked, her hand finding his. About the future, about us. Nathan took a deep breath. Thara, when you first came here, I was a lonely man with a failing farm and no hope for anything better. You changed everything. You made me remember what it feels like to have purpose, to care about something beyond just surviving. You made me want to be better, to build something meaningful. Thara was watching him intently, her amber eyes reflecting the sunset. I love you, Nathan continued. More than I thought I could ever love anyone, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring, one that had belonged to his mother. Thara Ironwood, will you marry me? Thara's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she could not speak. When she finally found her voice, it was shaking with emotion. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. I want nothing more than to be your wife, to build a life with you, to face whatever comes next together. Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and then she was in his arms, kissing him with a passion that made his heart race. When they finally broke apart, Both breathing hard, Thara rested her forehead against his. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "Marriage between a human and an orc. It will not be easy. There will be people who oppose it, who may try to stop us." "Let them try," Nathan said firmly. "You are worth fighting for, Thara. Our love is worth fighting for, and I am done letting other people's prejudice dictate how I live my life." "When?" Thara asked. "When do you want to marry?" "As soon as possible," Nathan said. "Tomorrow, if we could manage it," Thara laughed, the sound full of joy. "Tomorrow might be rushing things, but soon, very soon." They spent the evening making plans, talking about where they could hold the ceremony and who might be willing to officiate. It would not be a traditional wedding by any measure, but they would make it their own. In the end, they decided to ask Governor Hartley if he would be willing to officiate, given his support for orc-human relations. To their surprise and delight, he agreed, saying he would be honored to be part of such a historic moment. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on a crisp autumn day with golden leaves falling around them. The ceremony was small and simple, held on Nathan's farm with only a handful of guests. Marcus came, and a few other townspeople who had become friendly with Nathan and Thara. Jasper was there, of course, sitting at Thara's feet and looking immensely satisfied with himself. Governor Hartley spoke about love transcending boundaries, about the courage it took to build bridges instead of walls. Nathan and Thara exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to stand together through whatever challenges came their way. When the governor pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Thara as the small gathering applauded. And in that moment, surrounded by people who had chosen to support their love despite societal pressure, Nathan felt more hopeful about the future than he had in years. The celebration afterwards was modest but joyful. They shared food and drink, told stories, and for a few hours simply enjoyed the happiness of the moment. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Governor Hartley pulled Nathan and Thara aside. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly, "that your marriage is being officially recorded in the territorial records. You are the first legally recognized human-orc marriage in this territory, perhaps in any territory. That makes you pioneers in a way." "We just want to be left in peace to build our life together," Thara said. "I understand," the governor said. "But whether you intended it or not, you are symbols now. Symbols of what is possible when people choose love over hate, understanding over prejudice. Others will look to your example." "Then we had better make it a good one," Nathan said, taking Thara's hand. The governor smiled. "I believe you will. Good luck to you both." After everyone had left, Nathan and Thara stood together in the yard of their farm, looking out at the land they would now truly share as partners in all ways. "We did it," Thara said softly. "We actually did it." "We did," Nathan agreed, "though I suspect the hard part is still ahead of us." "Probably," Thara said with a slight smile, "but we will face it together." "Together," Nathan echoed and led his wife into their home. The months that followed brought both challenges and joys. As the governor had predicted, news of their marriage spread quickly. Some people reacted with outrage, others with curiosity or cautious approval. There were incidents, more rocks thrown, threats scrawled on their barn in the middle of the night, one attempt by a group of young hotheads to burn their crops that Nathan and Thara fought off together. But there were also unexpected moments of support. Other mixed couples began to come forward, people who had been hiding their relationships out of fear. They looked to Nathan and Thara as proof that such love could exist openly. Some humans began to question their prejudices, seeing how Thara conducted herself with grace and dignity despite the hostility she faced. Through it all, Nathan and Thara's love only grew stronger. They learned each other's rhythms and habits. their strengths and weaknesses. They had arguments, certainly passionate disagreements about how to handle various situations or how to run the farm. But they always worked through them, always came back to the fundamental truth that they were better together than apart. Winter came again, and this time Nathan did not spend it alone. He and Thara weathered the cold months side by side, working on indoor projects and planning for the spring planting. They talked about the future, about possibly expanding the farm, about the children they might someday have. "Do you think it is selfish?" Thara asked one snowy evening as they sat by the fire. "Bringing children into a world that might reject them for being half orc." "I think it would be selfish not to," Nathan said thoughtfully. "Because children raised with love, who understand both human and orc cultures, who can bridge those divides, they could help build the world your father dreamed of. The world where species does not matter as much as character. You think we can actually change things? Two people on a small farm." "I think we already have," Nathan said, pulling her close. "We proved that love is stronger than prejudice. That is no small thing." When spring arrived, they planted their fields together, and this time Thara worked openly beside Nathan, not caring who might see. The crops grew strong and healthy, blessed by their combined labor and care. In early summer, Thara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with equal parts joy and terror. They knew their child would face challenges, growing up as a visible symbol of a taboo relationship. But they also knew their child would be loved fiercely and raised to be strong, kind, and proud of their heritage from both parents. 9 months later, on a cold winter morning, Thara gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She had her mother's green-tinged skin and pointed ears, but her father's eyes and nose. They named her Kayla Grace Pierce, and from the moment Nathan held his daughter for the first time, he knew he would move mountains to protect her and give her the life she deserved. Jasper, ancient now and moving slowly, seemed to understand the importance of the new addition to the family. He appointed himself Kayla's guardian, sleeping beside her cradle and watching over her with devoted attention. The old Hound passed away peacefully in his sleep when Kayla was 6 months old. They buried him on a hill overlooking the farm, and both Nathan and Thara wept for the dog who had brought them together. "He lived a good life," Thara said through her tears, holding Kayla close. "And he gave us the greatest gift possible by running to me that morning." "He did," Nathan agreed, wrapping his arms around his wife and daughter. "He brought our family together." As Kayla grew, Nathan and Thara worked hard to give her a childhood filled with love and security. They taught her about both her heritages, told her stories of her orc grandfather who had died fighting for peace, and her human grandmother who had valued cleanliness and order. They raised her to be proud of who she was, to never apologize for existing, and to always stand up for what was right. The farm prospered under their joint management, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Other farmers began to seek Thara's advice on crop rotation and animal husbandry, and gradually attitudes began to shift. It was not universal or quick, but slowly, grudgingly, the community began to accept that orcs were not monsters, just people trying to build decent lives. More mixed couples came forward, encouraged by Nathan and Thara's example. Governor Hartley's reforms continued to move forward, and within 5 years, the laws prohibiting orcs from living in human territory were officially repealed. Orc settlements began to appear in previously human-only areas, and trade between the species flourished. Nathan and Thara's marriage became a symbol of the changing times, proof that the old hatreds did not have to define the future. They never sought that role, never wanted to be symbols or pioneers. They just wanted to live their lives in peace, to raise their daughter, to to work their farm, and to love each other. But they accepted the responsibility that came with being visible, speaking at community meetings about tolerance and understanding, hosting visits from other mixed couples who needed encouragement, and always demonstrating through their daily lives that love knew no boundaries of species. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they stood together on the porch of the farmhouse watching Kayla play in the yard, Nathan pulled Thara close. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "The difficult path we chose?" Thara looked at him with those beautiful amber eyes, now crinkled at the corners with laugh lines earned through a decade of joy and struggle. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of doubt, it was all worth it for this. For you, for Kayla, for the life we built together." She paused, then smiled. "Though I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if Jasper had not run to me that morning, if he had just stayed sleeping by your woodpile. I think we still would have found each other somehow," Nathan said. "Some things are just meant to be." "Perhaps," Thara agreed, "but I am grateful to that stubborn old dog for making it happen sooner rather than later. He gave us years together that we might not have had otherwise." Nathan kissed her softly, thinking about the old hound who had somehow known, even in his dotage, that the orc woman standing at the edge of the property was meant to be part of their lives. Jasper had run straight to Thara before Nathan could even react, and by dusk that first day, Nathan had understood why. Because Thara was not a monster or an enemy or a threat. She was a person who had lost everything and deserved kindness. She was a daughter mourning her father and seeking connection to something she had loved. She was a brave soul standing up for peace in a world that wanted war. She was, simply, the woman Nathan was meant to love for the rest of his life. And in understanding that, in choosing to act on it despite all the obstacles in their path, Nathan had found not just love but purpose, not just a partner but a true home. Kayla's laughter rang out across the yard as she chased butterflies through the wildflowers that now grew along the edge of the field. The farm was peaceful and prosperous, the land fertile and well-tended. In the distance, smoke rose from the chimney of their neighbor's house, an orc family who had settled on the adjacent property just last year, confident that they would be safe and welcome, thanks to the precedent Nathan and Thara had set. The world was changing, slowly but surely moving toward the vision of peace that Thara's father had died for. And here on this small farm, in the daily life of this unusual family, that vision was already real. Nathan held his wife close, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling her strong, steady heartbeat against his chest. Jasper's grave on the hillside was marked with a simple stone, but his legacy lived on in the family he had brought together, in the love that had flourished because an old hound had remembered who he belonged to and run toward home. "I love you," Nathan murmured against Thara's ear. "I love you too," she replied, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. "Always and forever." "Always and forever," Nathan echoed and meant it with every fiber of his being. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Kayla ran up to the porch, her cheeks flushed with exercise and joy, demanding to be picked up and swung around. Nathan obliged, lifting his daughter high as she squealed with delight, while Thara watched them both with a smile that held the contentment of a life well lived and a future full of hope. This was their happy ending, hard-won and precious. A human veteran and an outcast orc, brought together by an old dog's unerring instinct for love, building a life that proved peace was possible one day, one choice, one act of courage at a time. And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky above their farm, Nathan knew with absolute certainty that every challenge they had faced and would face in the future was worth it for his wife's hand in his daughter's laughter ringing in the air, and the quiet, powerful knowledge that love had conquered all.